Tension between Japan and China has moved far beyond political exchanges. In recent months, Chinese fighter jets approached Japanese airspace and Japanese aircraft launched within minutes to respond. Meanwhile, Chinese Coast Guard ships increased their presence near the disputed islands, and Japanese vessels mirrored every movement. Drones crossed sensitive boundaries. Naval ships shadowed each other at close range. Radar systems watched every shift in the skies and at sea. These events show a clear change in the region. The East China Sea is no longer a quiet zone of diplomatic difference. It has become a place where military activity unfolds every day. The region connects important shipping routes, sits between two large economies. Therefore, any change in stability here affects global trade, regional politics, and international security. This raises important questions. What caused this rapid rise in military presence? Why have both China and Japan increased patrols at the same time? How does this situation influence the wider Asia-Pacific? Today we explore these developments through a calm and factual lens. The center of this dispute is a small group of islands. Japan calls them Senkaku. China calls them Diaoyu. Taiwan also claims them. These islands have no permanent residents. However, their position in the sea gives them large strategic and economic value. The waters around these islands contain rich fishing grounds. Energy deposits may exist under the seabed. Exclusive economic zones overlap in this region. And control over the islands would extend maritime rights for whichever nation holds them. Therefore, the dispute is not only about land. It also involves access to resources and expansion of territorial waters. Japan has administered the islands since 1895. China disputes this timeline. Chinese leaders refer to older maps and documents which describe the islands as part of China. Japan states it followed international rules when it established control. Taiwan also presents its own historical records. These different interpretations create a dispute that has lasted for decades. The geography of the region adds even more pressure. The islands lie close to Taiwan. They also sit near the coast of China, and they remain within reach of Okinawa. Therefore, the location connects several major sea lanes. Ships that pass through these waters link ports across East and Southeast Asia. As a result, trillions of dollars worth of goods move through this area each year, which makes the stability of this region important for the global economy. The islands also sit along air routes and naval paths. Nations monitor these spaces with great care since they influence the military balance in the Asia-Pacific. The combination of resources, geography, and national pride creates a complex situation that remains sensitive for all sides. Several events over recent years brought new attention to this dispute. Japan scrambled fighter jets many times in response to Chinese aircraft. Chinese drones entered areas close to Japanese territory. Meanwhile, Coast Guard ships from both China and Japan increased their patrol activity. Each side described its actions as routine. However, the frequency and scale created global concern. In 2023 and 2024, Chinese Coast Guard ships spent record numbers of days near the islands. Japanese ships followed them closely. Encounters became more common. Radio messages reflected rising tension. These moments did not lead to direct conflict. However, they showed how easily an incident could trigger a dangerous response. Japan also made major changes to its defense strategy. The government approved new security plans that increased defense spending. Japan developed counter-strike capabilities. The Coast Guard received new ships and more personnel. Air defense systems were modernized. These steps aimed to improve Japan's ability to protect its territory. China responded with its own actions. The Chinese Navy increased drills near Taiwan and in the East China Sea. The People's Liberation Army conducted large-scale exercises. China passed a Coast Guard law that expanded enforcement powers. Chinese officials describe these actions as necessary for national security. Japan and other nations viewed them as signs of growing confidence and assertiveness. The United States and Japan also increased joint military exercises. Fighter jets trained together. Naval ships worked on coordinated operations. These drills included scenarios related to island defense. China saw these actions as attempts to pressure Beijing. Therefore, China conducted counter-drills and strengthened its presence in nearby waters. This pattern created a cycle. When one side increased activity, the other side responded. Each action shaped the next. This cycle continues today with no sign of slowing. China views the East China Sea through the lens of national security and historical identity. Chinese leaders often state that these islands belong to China based on ancient maps and documents. They argue that Japan took control during a period of imperial expansion. Therefore, China sees its actions as part of a long process of correcting past injustice. Strategic concerns also guide Chinese policy. The islands lie within the first island chain, which is an area China watches closely in its military planning. Control of near seas supports Chinese defense in case of external pressure. The region also plays a role in China's ability to project power and maintain freedom of movement for its navy. Resources matter as well. The East China Sea may contain valuable energy deposits. Fishing grounds support large coastal communities. Access to these resources strengthens national stability. Therefore, the islands carry economic value that goes beyond symbolism. Chinese Coast Guard ships and naval vessels show presence and gather information. Air Force flights test response times. Surveillance builds a picture of activity in the region. These actions serve as deterrence and communication. They signal resolve to Japan and to the United States. China also pays attention to the United States and Japan alliance. American treaty commitments to Japan remain clear. Therefore, China sees the alliance as a major factor in the dispute. Chinese planners believe any conflict with Japan could involve the United States. This shapes Chinese decisions. Beijing often calibrates its actions to avoid escalation while still defending its claims. Japan maintains it has clear administrative control over the islands. Japanese leaders point to decades of governance. The Coast Guard has patrolled the area for many years. Japan also highlights past records that show active management of the islands. These factors support Japanese claims of sovereignty. National security plays a major role in Japanese policy. The islands sit along sea lanes that carry essential energy supplies. Japan depends heavily on imported oil and gas. Therefore, any threat to these routes creates serious risk for the economy. Public opinion adds pressure. Citizens expect strong protection of national territory. Media coverage of Chinese vessels near the islands raises public concern. Political leaders must respond with firm action to maintain public confidence. Japan has also changed its military posture. The government reinterpreted constitutional rules to allow collective self-defense. This shift opened new options for cooperation with allies. Japan approved counter-strike capabilities as a way to strengthen deterrence. These changes show how Japan adapts to a more uncertain security environment. The Coast Guard expanded as well. New vessels joined the fleet. Technology improved. Training increased. Japan invested in maritime awareness to track activity in the region with more precision. Airspace incursions create additional stress. Japanese jets respond to Chinese aircraft at a rapid rate. Each scramble uses fuel and maintenance resources. Pilots face fatigue. Therefore, Japan looks for ways to improve efficiency while still protecting its airspace. The United States is a central player in this dispute. A defense treaty binds America to Japan. American officials have stated clearly that the treaty covers the islands under Japanese administration. Therefore, any attack on the islands could lead to American involvement. This commitment influences decisions on both sides. Japan relies on the alliance to strengthen its deterrence. Joint exercises display unity. American forces in Japan provide reassurance. The United States also conducts freedom of navigation operations in the region. These missions aim to maintain open sea routes. Washington argues these operations support international law. China sees them as actions near sensitive territory. American policy seeks to prevent escalation. Washington does not take a position on the sovereignty of the islands. It recognizes Japanese administration while encouraging peaceful resolution. This balanced approach shapes reactions in Beijing and Tokyo. China studies American involvement closely. Beijing knows that any confrontation with Japan may involve American forces. Therefore, China must measure each action carefully. The risk of escalation remains real. Military ships from both sides sail in close proximity. A collision could trigger crisis. Miscommunication at sea may lead to sudden actions that neither side intends. Fighter jets fly near each other. Pilots need to make rapid decisions. Radar systems track many aircraft. One unexpected move can create danger. Overlapping maritime claims add legal complexity. Each nation believes it operates within its rights. Coast Guard ships from China and Japan enter the same waters with different interpretations of sovereignty. Naval ships pass through contested zones where no clear rules exist. Technology increases uncertainty. Modern surveillance tools track every movement. Cyber activity could disrupt communication. Electronic systems might interfere with sensors. These factors make crisis management harder. Domestic politics limit flexibility. Leaders face pressure from public opinion. National pride shapes policy. These forces reduce the ability to compromise. Communication channels exist. However, their performance during real emergencies is not yet tested. Differences in language and culture can influence how messages are interpreted. Activity in the region will continue. Chinese Coast Guard ships will maintain regular patrols. Japanese vessels will respond with equal presence. No nation shows signs of stepping back. Drone technology will expand. Both sides invest in unmanned systems. Drones provide surveillance without risking pilots. Therefore, they will become more common in the East China Sea. Large-scale exercises will continue. China will hold drills near the East China Sea and Taiwan. Japan and the United States will strengthen joint training. Each exercise sends signals to the other side. Diplomatic engagement will also continue. Track 2 meetings provide informal discussions. Academic forums explore solutions. Economic ties encourage cooperation. Crisis management will grow in importance. Both sides understand the risks. Efforts to improve communication will continue. Trust develops slowly, yet it remains essential for stability. Regional dynamics will shape the future. South Korea monitors developments closely. ASEAN nations view the situation with concern. Taiwan remains part of the wider equation. Global markets depend on peace in the Asia-Pacific. The military tension between China and Japan reflects deep history, strategic needs, and economic realities. Each nation believes it defends its rightful interests. Both operate strong forces in a narrow and sensitive region. These factors create a dispute that remains difficult to resolve. A quick solution seems unlikely. Territorial issues rarely settle fast. National identity and strategic planning influence long-term policy. However, global stability depends on restraint, communication, and calm judgment. Understanding this situation requires a clear look at facts. History explains the roots. Geography shapes the pressure. Alliances add complexity. The East China Sea influences far more than Asia. It affects global trade routes, energy supplies, and international security. At FactoPiaX, we explain these stories with clarity and depth. We focus on truth, neutrality, and understanding. We respect your intelligence, and we deliver analysis that helps you see the full picture. If you value calm and factual explanations, join our community. Subscribe to FactoPiaX. Stay informed. Stay curious. New videos arrive every day on various mind-blowing topics. Your understanding begins here.